"You are my property now," Mountain Man declared to his terrified fat wife, his true meaning. "You are my property now," he said. The words cracked through the air like a whip. The crowd in the auction yard fell silent. The heavy summer heat pressed down on Evangeline Fairhaven's trembling body as the auctioneer's gavel struck wood. In that moment, she was no longer a daughter, no longer a woman, just a name on a ledger. She had been sold. Her father's debts had dragged her family into ruin. Her mother had begged for mercy. None came. Now, beneath the blistering sun, Ava stood on a wooden platform, wrists bound, eyes wide with disbelief. When the bidding began, men laughed. Some shouted prices as if they were buying cattle. One said, "Too fat to fetch much." Another jeered, "Maybe she'll make a decent cook." And then a single voice cut through the noise, deep, steady, commanding, $500. The yard went still. The man stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, with weather-creased skin and the bearing of someone who'd seen battlefields and storms. His dark eyes didn't leer. They measured. "Captain Jeremiah Freewind," someone whispered, half in awe, half in fear. "The abolitionist, the one who burned the slave ships." The auctioneer hesitated. "Sir, the woman's not—" "Sold," Jer interrupted, slamming the coins onto the table. He turned toward her then, his voice low but absolute. "Come with me, Evangeline. From this moment on, you are mine." The crowd murmured, some laughing, some afraid. Ava's knees weakened. Tears blurred her vision. She had just been bought again, but this time by a man whose eyes held both fury and something she couldn't name. She didn't know it yet, but the price he paid wasn't for possession. It was for her freedom. The mountain road wound like a scar through the wilderness, climbing higher into the mist. Ava sat in the back of the wagon, wrists still raw from the rope burns, her heart pounding with every turn. The man who had bought her, Captain Jeremiah Freewind, sat silently at the reins. He hadn't spoken since they left the auction yard. She studied him through tear-blurred eyes, his weathered hands gripping the reins, the old military coat on his shoulders, the faint scar that ran from his jaw to his temple. He carried himself like a man haunted by ghosts, disciplined, distant, untouchable. Every creak of the wagon wheel made her flinch. Every silence felt heavy with threat. By the time they reached the cabin at dusk, her fear had hardened into despair. The cabin stood alone on Liberty Ridge, surrounded by pines and wind that howled like memories. It wasn't a home. It was a fortress. Inside, the walls were lined with maps, coded documents, and shelves full of ledgers. A pistol rested beside a Bible on the wooden table. Jeremiah closed the door, locking it with a solid click. The sound made Ava's breath hitch. He turned toward her. "You'll stay here," he said evenly. "No one will touch you now." "Because I belong to you," she whispered, her voice trembling. His brow furrowed, but he didn't answer. He took a candle, lit it, and set it on the table between them. Its flame trembled like her heart. Ava's voice cracked. "What do you want from me?" He looked at her, really looked, for the first time. "Not obedience," he said quietly. "Safety." She didn't understand. He took a deep breath. "The men who sold you, they were traffickers. You were about to be shipped south to a life you wouldn't have survived. I had to claim you under the law to pull you out of their hands. For now, yes, on paper, you're my property. But in truth, you belong to no one." Ava shook her head, disbelieving. You're lying. They all lie. Jeremiah didn't argue. He walked to the hearth, took out a small tin box, and placed it before her. Inside were dozens of burned documents, ownership deeds, contracts, names of people he had freed. "I've done this before," he said. "Every person I buy, I set free." He took a folded paper from his pocket, her certificate of ownership, and laid it on the flame. It curled, blackened, turned to ash. Eva gasped as the paper crumbled. "There," he said softly. "The law says you're mine. I say you're free." For the first time since the auction, she lifted her eyes to him, not in fear, but in confusion and something fragile, almost like hope. "Why?" she whispered. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. "Because I've seen what happens when good men do nothing, and because once someone freed me." He turned away before she could ask more. "There's food on the stove. Eat, rest. Tomorrow you decide whether to stay." Ava stood frozen long after he'd gone to the next room. In the flicker of firelight, surrounded by maps and weapons and secrets, she realized this was no ordinary man, and no ordinary captivity. It was the first night she slept without chains. The next morning, mist clung to the trees like ghosts of the past. Ava woke to the sound of an axe splitting wood outside. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the scent of coffee and smoke brought everything back. Captain Jeremiah Freewind was already up, sleeves rolled, chopping wood with rhythmic precision. He worked silently, like a man who had made peace with solitude. Ava hesitated at the doorway, wrapped in a wool blanket. Her bare feet touched the cold floorboards, but she didn't dare step further. Every part of her wanted to flee. But where would she go? The mountains stretched endlessly, and the memory of iron shackles still clung to her skin. Jeremiah looked up. "You can come out," he said, not unkindly. She froze. He sighed, set down the axe, and gestured toward a bench near the fire pit. "Sit. You should eat." A tin cup of coffee waited beside a bowl of porridge. She stared at it, suspicious. "Why are you doing this?" His gaze flickered toward the horizon. "Because no one ever fed me when I was hungry." They ate in silence, broken only by the cry of a hawk above the ridge. After a while he said, "You can explore around the cabin if you want, but stay close. The forest can be cruel to strangers." Ava nodded, though she didn't move. That day, she watched him repair fences, clean rifles, and mark routes on a map, lines leading to towns she had never heard of. Late in the afternoon, when the sun dipped behind the trees, a horse approached, carrying 2 riders cloaked in brown. Jeremiah met them behind the barn, his voice low, the words "safe house" and "coastline" floating faintly through the air. Ava listened, curiosity battling fear. Who were they? Rebels? Soldiers? When the strangers left, Jeremiah found her waiting by the door. "You heard?" he said. "I didn't mean to," she stammered. "I just—" He raised a hand. "It's fine. If you're staying here, you should know the truth. This cabin isn't just a home. It's a link in a chain." Her brows furrowed. "A chain?" "A chain of freedom," he said. "We move people through the mountains, men, women, children, anyone who's been bought or sold. We hide them, feed them, and send them north where the law can't reach." Ava's breath caught. You free them?" He nodded. "We free ourselves. Every time we break another chain, the world grows a little lighter." That night, she couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the cracks of the cabin, but beneath the fear, something new stirred in her. admiration, perhaps even awe. The next morning, when Jeremiah went to saddle his horse, he found her already there, clutching a small satchel. "Where are you going?" he asked. "With you," she said, her voice steadier than before. "If you're helping others, maybe I can help too." He studied her for a long moment. "You don't owe me that." "I know," she said. "That's why I want to." A flicker of warmth crossed his stern face. "Then ride with me. But remember, freedom isn't given. It's earned, step by step." They rode out together through the fog-draped valley. The path wound past rivers and over ridges, through silence so deep she could hear her own heartbeat. By dusk, they reached an abandoned church, a safe house. Inside were 3 women and 2 children, trembling, exhausted, their wrists still scarred by ropes. Ava stared at them, her reflection mirrored in their fear. Jeremiah knelt beside a child, offering water and bread. When he looked up, Ava was already kneeling next to him, her hand shaking, but determined. That night, by the fire, as the rescued slept around them, Jeremiah murmured, "You did well." Ava looked at the flames. "I didn't do anything." He shook his head. "You stayed. That's more than most ever do." And for the first time, she felt a strange warmth inside her, not ownership, not obedience, but belonging. Winter crept down from the mountains like a silent army. The days grew shorter, the nights colder, and Liberty Ridge became a world of its own, isolated, white, and whispering. Ava had been living in Jeremiah's cabin for nearly 3 months. The woman who once flinched at every sound now moved through the house with quiet confidence. She cooked, tended the fire, mended his clothes, and even began writing in the small journal he'd given her. Every free person should have their own story written down, Jeremiah had told her. The world forgets too easily. Words make us exist. Sometimes, when he returned from long trips guiding refugees through the mountains, she'd wait by the fire, pretending to read, but really just listening for the crunch of boots outside. One evening, snow fell thick against the windows. Jeremiah entered, face reddened by the wind. Ava rose from her chair immediately. "You're freezing. Sit, please." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I used to command sailors tougher than ice, but I won't argue with hot stew." As she ladled soup into a bowl, he glanced around the room. The cabin looked warmer now. Curtains she'd sewn, books stacked neatly, wildflowers pressed in jars. "You've changed this place," he said softly. "It used to feel like a hiding spot. Now it feels alive." Ava looked up, startled. "I didn't mean to—" He interrupted gently. "Don't apologize. You made it better." Their eyes met, briefly, then broke away. Later that night, they sat by the fire, him sharpening a knife, her stitching a tear in his coat. "How do you stand it?" she asked suddenly. "All this fighting, all this danger, doesn't it ever wear you down?" Jeremiah's gaze lingered on the flames. "It does, every day. But I've seen what happens when you stop fighting. Evil doesn't rest, so neither can I." He looked at her then, his voice softer. "And you, Eva? What do you want now that you're free?" She hesitated, fingers tightening around the thread. I want to help, to make sure no one ever feels what I felt that day on the auction block. To be brave enough to stand beside you when it matters." He said nothing for a while, then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "You already are." A storm broke that night, howling through the mountain. The roof creaked, snow piled against the door, and they were trapped for 2 full days. During those hours they spoke little, but silence between them had grown comfortable. On the second night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Ava found him by the window, staring into the blizzard. "You should rest," she said. "I can't," he murmured. "Storms like this bring danger. The patrols move under cover of snow." "Then let me stay awake with you," she said quietly. He turned, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Why?" "Because you shouldn't have to fight alone." Jeremiah's expression softened. "Ava, you don't owe me that." "I know," she replied. "That's why it matters." They sat together near the fire, side by side, watching shadows dance along the log walls. At some point, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move away. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, for the first time in years, Jeremiah Freewind allowed himself to feel something like peace. When the storm passed, sunlight spilled across the snow, dazzling and pure. The first thing he saw when he opened the door was Eva, standing on the ridge, face turned toward the light, her breath rising like smoke into the cold morning air. Freedom, he thought, wasn't a law or a decree. It was this, the simple act of someone choosing to stay when they could have left. And deep down, he knew, whatever battles still waited beyond the mountains, he would never fight them alone again. The thaw came slowly that spring. Streams began to flow again, and the forest returned to life. But with it came danger. Rumors trickled up the mountain like smoke from a distant fire. The government was cracking down on illegal rescue networks. Jeremiah had grown more distant. His nights were restless, and letters kept arriving sealed with red wax. Ava noticed how his expression darkened each time he read one. One morning, as he saddled his horse for another secret trip, she stood in the doorway. "You're leaving again," she said softly. He paused. "Only for a few days." "You said that last time." Jeremiah hesitated, then met her gaze. "There's trouble in the lowlands. One of our safe houses was raided. People were taken." "Taken where?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "To prison, or worse." Her breath caught. "You're going to get them back, aren't you?" He nodded. "Someone has to." "Then take me with you." His voice hardened. "No, it's too dangerous." "I've been in danger all my life," she said, stepping closer. "At least this time I'd be choosing it." For a moment, silence filled the cabin, the kind that carries both fear and defiance. Jeremiah's jaw clenched, but there was admiration in his eyes. "You've changed, Ava." She smiled faintly. "You taught me how." He left at dawn. Days turned into weeks, with no word. Ava tried to distract herself with work, mending clothes and preparing supplies, but dread grew inside her like a living thing. Every knock at the door made her heart leap. Then one night, long after sunset, a horse stumbled into the yard. Jeremiah collapsed from the saddle, blood on his sleeve, a bullet lodged in his arm. Ava ran to him. "Jera!" He waved her off weakly. "Not now. They followed me." Within moments, torches flickered through the trees, a patrol of federal marshals shouting orders. Ava's mind raced. She pulled him inside, barred the door, and helped him sit by the fire. "Who are they after?" "Me," he rasped, "and everyone who worked with me. They found out I'm the one behind the northern routes." The words hit her like a blade. "You never told me. I wanted to keep you safe." "By lying to me?" He met her gaze, tired, haunted. "If they knew who you were, they'd hang you beside me." The door shuddered under a heavy kick. Ava's fear twisted into something sharper. Resolve. She ran to the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards and pulled out the maps, coded ledgers, and letters Jeremiah had kept. "We can't let them find these." "Burn them," he ordered. She hesitated. "They're proof. They show what you did, all the lives you saved." He shook his head. "They're a death sentence now." Outside, boots crunched closer. Ava threw the papers into the fire, watching years of sacrifice curl and vanish into ash. The flames reflected in her eyes like twin suns of defiance. Jeremiah reached for her hand. "You shouldn't have to pay for my sins." She knelt beside him, voice trembling. "Your only sin was saving people. If that's a crime, then I'll share your punishment." A loud crash. The door splintered open. "Captain Freewind!" a marshal barked, stepping into the light. "You're under arrest for aiding fugitives." He stopped short. Ava stood between them, holding Jeremiah's pistol steady, her hands shaking, but her aim true. "Get out," she said. "No one dies here tonight." The marshal hesitated. Something in her eyes, raw, furious, unbroken, made him falter. He looked at Jeremiah, then back at her, before slowly lowering his rifle. "You can't run forever." "Maybe not," she replied, "but while we breathe, we fight." The marshals retreated into the night, leaving the mountains silent once more. When the last torch disappeared, Ava dropped the gun and fell to her knees, trembling. Jeremiah reached for her, his voice hoarse. "You just saved my life." She met his gaze through tears. "No, you saved mine the day you bought me my freedom. Tonight, I just returned the favor." The marshals returned 3 nights later. Ava knew it before she saw them, before the flicker of torches across the ridge, before the thunder of hooves echoing through the valley. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Jeremiah sat propped against the cabin wall, his arm bound in linen, still pale from blood loss. "They won't give up this time," he said quietly. Ava checked the rifle she'd reloaded earlier. Her hands were steady. "Then neither will we." Through the window, she saw 6 riders dismount and spread into the trees, their guns glinting in the moonlight. She turned to him. "If they take you, they'll hang you before sunrise." Jeremiah met her gaze. "And if you stay, they'll take you too. You can still run." She shook her head. "You bought me my freedom, remember? It's mine to spend, and I choose to spend it here." He exhaled, a sound somewhere between fear and pride. "You stubborn woman." Outside, the first shout came. "Free Wind, come out and surrender yourself to federal authority." Jeremiah rose slowly, wincing in pain. "We'll face them together." But Ava stepped forward first, pushing open the door. The cold night swallowed her whole. Snowflakes drifted through the air like ash. She walked out onto the porch, holding the lantern high. "I'm Evangeline Freewind," she called. "This cabin is mine. This land is mine. You have no right to take either." The marshal in front sneered. "We're not here for you, ma'am. We're here for the man who broke federal law." She took a step closer, her voice rising. "The law that sells people like cattle, the law that calls mercy a crime." Behind her, Jeremiah emerged, leaning heavily on the doorframe, his rifle resting on his shoulder. "You want me? Then you'll have to shoot through her first." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. The men shifted uneasily. They hadn't come to kill a woman. They'd come to make an example. Then from the tree line, another voice shouted, not of command, but of defiance. "You'll have to shoot through us all." Lanterns flared in the dark. Dozens of figures stepped out. Villagers, farmers, the very people Jeremiah and Ava had freed. Men and women armed with nothing more than tools and courage. The marshals turned, overwhelmed. Jeremiah's voice cut through the night. "You see, gentlemen, freedom spreads faster than fear." The lead marshal cursed, then yanked his reins. "This isn't over," he spat before turning his horse back down the trail. The others followed, torches vanishing one by one into the dark. Silence fell again. Ava lowered her lantern, her breath trembling. Jeremiah leaned against her, his strength failing, but his eyes, those steadfast, storm-worn eyes, never left hers. "They'll be back," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Then we'll be ready." As dawn broke over Liberty Ridge, the light fell across the cabin's smoke-streaked roof, and the people gathered around it, no longer fugitives, no longer slaves. Just free souls who refused to kneel. And for the first time in her life, Ava realized freedom wasn't something given. It was something defended. The war for freedom didn't end that night, but something in Ava did. For the first time, she understood what it meant to stand, not because someone allowed her to, but because she chose to. The fear that had ruled her since the auction, since the shackles, since the word property, it was gone, burned away in firelight and courage. Weeks passed. The marshals never returned. The ridge became a haven again, its cabins filled with laughter and the smell of bread baking. Jeremiah healed slowly, though the wound in his arm would ache every time the wind turned cold. One evening, Ava found him carving a piece of wood outside the cabin. It was small, rough-edged, a carving of a bird mid-flight. "For you," he said quietly, handing it to her, "a reminder. You were never anyone's possession, Ava, not even mine. You were only ever waiting for your wings." She smiled, eyes wet. "You gave me the sky, Jera, and I'm never giving it back." That night, as snow fell soft and silent over Liberty Ridge, they sat beside the fire, no longer captor and captive, but equals, partners, survivors. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked. He nodded. "A school, for those who were never taught to read, a place where no one's name is written on a bill of sale." "And you'll teach them?" she teased. He smiled faintly. "No, we will." The flames flickered, casting warm light over two faces that had known darkness and chosen to build something brighter. Outside, the world was still cruel, but inside that cabin, freedom had found a home. Every time we tell stories like this, we remember that freedom is not just a word, it's a heartbeat. It's the quiet defiance in every soul that refuses to be broken, and the love that grows even in the ashes of cruelty. Ava and Jeremiah's story isn't only about escape, it's about redemption, courage, and the power to choose your own fate. Wherever you're listening from, America, Vietnam, Germany, or somewhere far beyond the mountains, tell me, do you still believe that love can free even the most wounded hearts? Because this isn't the end. It's only the beginning.